What if a company built the most powerful AI in history and then decided the world wasn't ready for it? That's not a hypothetical. That happened this week.
And that same week, the company that built it overtook OpenAI in revenue. Stanford confirmed China has nearly closed the AI gap, and the global VC machine poured $300 billion into AI in a single quarter. We have a lot to unpack.
Let's go. Okay, Sarah, we have to start here. Anthropic built a model called Claude Mythos 5, 10 trillion parameters, and they finished it, completed. Then they locked it in a vault.
This is genuinely unprecedented. Every major AI lab to date has built something, tested it, and shipped it. Anthropic built Mythos 5, ran it through their internal safety evaluation, what they call the ASL framework, Anthropic safety levels, and it hit ASL 4. That is their highest risk designation.
And ASL 4 means what exactly? Because I think people hear safety concern and assume it's like a liability thing, a legal thing.
No, it's a technical red line. ASL 4 means the model demonstrates capabilities that could meaningfully contribute to catastrophic harm at scale. Think weapons of mass destruction assistance or undermining critical oversight mechanisms. The architecture is what makes it unusual. Mixture of experts, so only about 800 billion to 1.2 trillion parameters are active on any given pass. But the full ceiling is 10 trillion. It's the biggest AI model ever completed by any lab.
So here's the business question. Anthropic invested enormous capital building this thing. It's sitting on a shelf. What does that tell us about the state of the industry?
It tells us we've crossed a threshold. For the first time, capability has outrun our readiness to govern it. Not in theory, but in practice, at a major lab that then made the call to hold the line. Whether you think that's courage or competitive strategy, the fact is, it happened.
And the governance gap is real. Because there's no international framework, no regulatory body, no treaty that covers what to do with a model that's too capable to deploy. That's a policy vacuum with trillion-dollar stakes.
Here's where this gets really interesting from a market perspective. While Anthropic is quietly shelving their most powerful model, they just hit $30 billion in annual recurring revenue, and that puts them ahead of OpenAI.
Let that land. Anthropic is now the top-grossing AI company on the planet. 15 months ago, they were at $1 billion in ARR. 30 times growth. That is not a growth rate. That is a category rewrite.
And the story of how they got there matters. Claude models dominate enterprise AI adoption right now. The reason isn't just capability, it's trust. Anthropic built a reputation for saying no to risky deployments, for being transparent about limitations, for taking safety seriously. And it turns out enterprise procurement teams respond to that.
That's the lesson that every move fast and break things culture should be studying right now. The company that went slower, said no more often, and built its brand around responsible AI. That company just lapped the field on revenue. Fortune covered this, and the framing was essentially, the tortoise won.
The practical implication for professionals is real. When your organization is evaluating AI vendors, the safety posture of that vendor is now a revenue grade signal. It's not a checkbox, it's a competitive differentiator.
Let's talk geopolitics for a second. Stanford AI just dropped the 2026 AI Index, and the headline buried under all the usual stats is the one that should be making front pages everywhere. The United States leads China by 2.7% on top model performance.
2.7%. And that gap is shrinking. American and Chinese models have literally traded the #1 spot multiple times since early 2025. This isn't a race where one side is pulling ahead. It's a dead heat.
And the dimensions where China is ahead are worth naming. Patents, China leads. Academic publication volume, China leads. State-backed compute infrastructure. 44 countries now operate national AI supercomputing clusters. This is not a two-country race anymore.
The U.S. still has real advantages: hardware supply chain control, private capital concentration, and the talent pipeline from top research universities. But those are moats, not guarantees. The Stanford Index was pretty clear that the moats are narrowing faster than most policymakers expected.
The takeaway for anyone in enterprise AI, in government contracting, in any sector that intersects with national security or supply chain, the competitive landscape of AI just got a lot more complicated than American AI versus the rest.
Okay, this one hit me hard, because we talk constantly about AI adoption, the tools, the capabilities, the investment, And then you see this. 80% of enterprise workers are actively avoiding or outright rejecting AI tools that their companies are paying for.
80%. Let's be specific. Where is this data coming from?
Ramp's enterprise spending data and a separate Fortune survey of large organizations. And it gets worse when you look at ROI. Only 28% of enterprise AI use cases in core infrastructure are meeting return on investment expectations. 20% are failing outright. The industry has a deployment problem, not a technology problem.
And this connects directly to people watching this channel. If you understand why AI tools fail inside organizations, the change management piece, the workflow integration piece, the trust building piece, that is a career skill right now. That's a skill that makes you valuable regardless of what tools get released next quarter.
The failure patterns are pretty consistent. Tools deployed without adequate training, AI outputs that aren't integrated into existing workflows, employees who feel surveilled rather than supported. The technology works. The implementation is breaking down.
So if you're in a role where you're the person who could bridge that gap, who can translate between the AI capability and the human behavior, that's the most defensible position in any organization right now. Be that person. Let's zoom out to the money. Q1 2026. $300 billion in global venture capital funding in 90 days. That's more than double any previous quarter in history.
To put it in context, OpenAI raised $122 billion. Anthropic's Series G closed at $30 billion. AI startups absorbed 81% of all global VC capital in the quarter. Every other sector of the economy is fighting over the remaining 19%.
This is what an arms race looks like when it's funded. And the implication is straightforward. The disruption isn't slowing down because some companies have matured. It's accelerating because the capital to build the next wave is already committed and deployed.
For anyone trying to time this market or waiting for things to settle down before they engage with AI seriously, this is your signal. The people funding this at that scale are not expecting a plateau. They're expecting continued exponential change.
The arms race is funded. The only question is which side of the disruption you want to be on.
Quick one before we wrap, and this one has real implications for anyone who's ever worked at a startup. When companies go bankrupt, their assets get sold. Normal. But a service called Asset Hub is now facilitating the sale of one specific asset: private Slack messages and internal emails from defunct companies.
And we're talking real money. Hundreds of thousands of dollars per dataset. These messages get sold to AI training pipelines, and they contain names, personal conversations, internal debates that employees never consented to having used this way.
Privacy advocates are alarmed, and rightly so. The legal framework here is murky at best. Your employment agreement probably said your work communications belong to the company, but nobody expected the company to liquidate and sell your words to a model trainer.
If you've ever worked at a startup that later went under, this is worth knowing. And if you're building AI products that train on third-party data, this is a supply chain integrity issue that's coming for your legal team. Okay, before we wrap, because we'd be doing you a disservice if we only showed you the layoff side of this story. There's a counter-narrative building, and the data behind it is significant.
This comes from Josh Berson's Global Workforce Intelligence Report, LinkedIn Learning's 2026 Workplace Learning Data, and a detailed benchmark study from Rework. The headline: companies that are investing heavily in reskilling their existing employees are outperforming the ones cutting, meaningfully.
Let's put numbers on it. 1 in 3 companies that made AI-driven layoffs has already been forced to rehire, and 52% of those rehires happened within 6 months. That's not a transformation. That's a very expensive experiment with a fast reversal.
And Zurich Insurance is the clearest case study. They ran an 8-week manager-facilitated AI fluency program across their underwriting and claims teams, spent about $6,200 per employee. The outcome: 34% reduction in routine documentation cycle time, 28% improvement in underwriter output. They attributed $43 million in annualized productivity gains to that single program cohort.
$43 million from one reskilling cohort. That's not a soft ROI story. That's a hard business case. And here's the comparison that makes the math undeniable. Workers with AI fluency are commanding a 27% salary premium in the job market right now. For a $75,000 role, that's $20,000 more per year to hire from outside. Reskilling your existing person at $4,500 versus paying a $60,000 three-year hiring premium. The math isn't close.
The catch is that most companies are spending $1,800 per employee on AI training. And that level of investment, on average, produces a 9% improvement in self-reported AI tool usage. Useful, not transformational. The organizations seeing 25+% productivity gains are spending 3 to 5 times that amount, and they're structuring it differently. Manager-led cohorts, embedded workflow training, not self-paced online courses that 77% of employees never finish.
So here's the message for this channel's audience specifically. If your company is cutting and not investing in the people who remain, that's a short-term move with long-term consequences. If you're the person pushing internally for AI reskilling, for tooling integration, for building that fluency across your team, you're not just advocating for your colleagues. You're advocating for a strategy that has a harder ROI than most cost-cutting initiatives.
And if you're an individual, the 27% salary premium for AI fluency is real. The reskilling investment required to get there is well within reach. The question isn't whether this pays off. The data says it does.
All right, let's bring it home. This week, Anthropic built the most powerful AI ever made and decided not to release it. They're now the highest revenue AI company on the planet. China is 2.5% behind the US in model performance. 80% of enterprise workers are rejecting AI tools. And that's a career opportunity if you're paying attention.
$300 billion in VC funding in one quarter means this isn't slowing down. 1 in 3 companies that cut too deep is already rehiring. And the companies investing in their people, not just their infrastructure, are the ones actually banking the productivity gains.
This is the world we're navigating. The companies and the individuals who engage with this transition, not run from it, are the ones who come out ahead. That's what your AI future is here for.
If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And drop your questions in the comments. We read them and we build episodes from them.
We'll see you next time. Stay ahead. That's the breakdown for today. The stories are moving fast, but the playbook for staying ahead doesn't change.
If any of this hit close to home for your industry or your role, the newsletter goes deeper every week. Link in the description.
We're Marcus Reed and Sarah Chen. This is your AI future. Subscribe if you want to keep up, and we'll see you tomorrow.